Welcome to the Irish Revolution. Last month we focused on the local elections in 1920. This month we're going to look at a wave of attacks on RIC barracks up and down the country. It's important to remember that in 1920 the idea of guerrilla warfare was not widely understood. Of course there had been recent examples of guerrilla struggles, notably the Boers in South Africa, but it's important to remember that the Boers ultimately failed, and anyway most military experts agreed that the conditions that the Boers fought in were unique to South Africa and irrelevant to European context. Lawrence of Arabia had written an article in Army Quarterly around this time which highlighted how a potential guerrilla war could succeed by irregular armies turning the advantages of conventional armies into weaknesses. By dispersing rather than concentrating their forces, irregular armies could win and seize the initiative. There is no record of any senior IRA commandant having read Lawrence's article, but nonetheless they seem to have stumbled across many of the methods by chance and circumstance. There were many in the IRA who were advocating for irregular warfare along the lines described by Lawrence above. We should also give a shout out to Bulmer Hobson, a key player in pre-1916 Republican politics who disappeared from history because of his opposition to the Easter Rising, who was an early advocate of so-called hedge warfare. But they struggled to explain how the IRA could possibly succeed against the mighty British Empire. In early 1920 there were still those arguing for more conventional warfare, as I mentioned in previous episodes. The idea was for a simultaneous attack on RIC barracks up and down the country, and for the IRA to hold this territory, even if only for a short time. These were internal debates and were not immediately resolved. Nevertheless, as historian Charles Townshend put it, in the absence of a clear doctrine, quote, the only way forward was trial and error, unquote. In other words, they were making up the rules as they went along. There was a wave of attacks in RIC barracks last month in January. In February the campaign continued with 9 across several counties: Longford, Wicklow, Monaghan, Cork and Tipperary. These were well planned attacks as conceded by the RIC Inspector General himself, but their failures outnumbered their successes. One of the successful attacks was in Ballytrain, County Monaghan. The Monaghan IRA were led by a man who would become infamous in later Irish history, Owen O'Duffy. The barracks itself was quite small, with a garrison of 6 men. O'Duffy planned the attack with great care, blocking all the approach roads and cutting off telephone and telegraph lines before the village was occupied by a large force of IRA men. A GHQ organiser, Ernie O'Malley, who would go on to become a major figure in the IRA, happened to be in Monaghan for the attack and witnessed it. The attack began around 2 a.m, with IRA men firing to cover their comrades who were laying a mine onto the gable wall. O'Duffy had hoped that the garrison would quickly surrender due to being so heavily outnumbered, but this wasn't to be. Apparently there were 2 sergeants in the barracks at the time, and neither one of them wanted to lose face. When they detonated the mine and blew a hole through the wall, injuring 1 policeman, the garrison then surrendered with no casualties. The attack would have failed if the mine had failed to explode, and many of the other attacks across the country failed for precisely this reason. The effect of the few successful attacks on the RIC was enormous. After the attack in Monaghan, the RIC withdrew from several small barracks in the area, leaving large parts of the country unpoliced. A failed attack at Allihees in County Cork led to an abandoned barracks and subsequent withdrawal from the Beara Peninsula. It's easy to see now how the war in Ireland was escalated, with the RIC nervous about attacks from the IRA and large parts of the countryside without a significant police presence. On to a new story now. On the 6th of February, President Eamon de Valera gave an interview to the New York correspondent of the Westminster Gazette. In it, he outlined, for the first time in public at least, his idea of an independent Ireland with external association with the British Empire. Essentially, he used the analogy of the United States and Cuba, where Cuba guaranteed the United States, being within her sphere of influence, that she would not be used as a base for foreign attack. De Valera denied that this entailed any surrender of national sovereignty, but it was a stick that his enemies in Irish America used to beat him with. The Cuban analogy went down quite badly with most Irish Americans, who rightly viewed Cuba as an American protectorate and not as an independent state in alliance with the United States. It also offers us an insight into De Valera's thinking when we get to the treaty in 1921. Okay, a look at some biographies now. Ernie O'Malley was an IRA officer and GHQ organiser during the War of Independence and a major anti-treaty IRA figure in the Civil War. His memoirs of his experience during the Irish Revolution are widely read to this day. O'Malley was from County Mayo and moved to Dublin when he was a child. He studied medicine in UCD in 1916 and he joined the rebels. After the Rising, he got closely involved with Republican politics and became a full-time organiser in 1918. As a training officer for rural IRA units, O'Malley was in Monaghan for the attack on Ballytrain Barracks in February 1920. In September, he participated in an attack on a British Army base in Mallow, County Cork. He was arrested in December 1920 and badly beaten. He escaped Kilmainham Jail in February 1921. O'Malley was then put in charge of the IRA's 2nd Southern Division. O'Malley opposed the Anglo-Irish Treaty and was among the men who occupied the Four Courts in Dublin in protest of it. He surrendered to the Free State Army when the building fell on the outbreak of the Civil War, but was able to escape again to Blessington and Wicklow. He was appointed the commander of anti-treaty forces in Ulster and Leinster. O'Malley was finally captured by the Free State forces after a shootout in South Dublin, and he almost died in the exchange. He spent the rest of the Civil War in a Free State prison. He would go on to publish his highly regarded memoirs after the war. Owen O'Duffy was the leader of the Monaghan Brigade during the War of Independence. He became Chief of Staff of the IRA in 1922 and was highly regarded by Michael Collins. He was pro-treaty. He became Commissioner of the newly formed Garda Síochána, the Free State Police Force replacing the previous Civic Guard. O'Duffy was associated with the Cumann na Gael party after the Civil War. He became head of the Army Comrades Association, better known as the Blue Shirts. O'Duffy was a fascist and admired the trappings of Italian fascism at the time, such as the Roman salute and the distinctive uniform. In 1933, the Blue Shirts merged with other organisations to form the Fine Gael party, and the fascist Owen O'Duffy was their first leader. O'Duffy led an expedition of Blue Shirts to Spain to fight for Franco in the Civil War. 700 Irishmen went to fight for fascism and were not highly regarded by Franco's regime. The men who fought for the Spanish Republic deserve an episode of their own, and they will have one eventually. Okay guys, thanks very much for watching and talk to you soon now. Good luck, bye.